Like, provided you have up to 1 year work experience, you are qualified. 1 year work experience is the minimum. Let's say the person has a PhD. It's not necessarily going to increase your score more than a single person's own. But there are 4 major components under express entry, right? So look at what each of them the first one, federal skill worker, is the most popular, and that's also what is going to be the major focus for today, especially once we get out of this stage. So federal skill workers means let me say this. When I first heard this, I thought that it had something to do with like you have to be working for the government. You know, when you say federal skilled workers, like, you know, when we say federal workers, what comes to your mind? Government workers. Yeah, but it's not. That's not what it means. Federal skilled workers means one, federal. So it's a country-wide program. It's a country-wide program. Skilled means it's for skilled. It's people that are skilled. Workers, you must have worked. Alright? So it's a country-wide program, so it's federal. That means all the provinces, aka all the states in Canada, they are all doing it. So it's a federal thing. You know the way we say, let's say, yeah, okay, cool. Anything that is country-wide, right? And you understand it more by the time I get to number 3, because number 3 is a provincial nominee, which is like state nominee, meaning Imo State can be doing something, Enugu State may be doing another, Kano may be doing another. So those things are state by state. So when they say federal, it's like the whole Ghana, the whole Nigeria, the whole Kenya, something like that. Good. So federal skill workers means, first of all, it is countrywide, which is federal. It is for people that are skilled. What comes to your mind is like you have to be a professional. And when I mean professional, okay, you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you are a banker, you are a pharmacist, you're a teacher, you're a professional, right? And then workers, you must have worked. Why? Because you may be a professional. If you don't have work experience, you will not qualify for it. So if you remember federal skill workers, I remember what each of them means. We can then put it together. It's a country-wide program for people that are skilled who have work experience. Ha! Oh, look at that. Look at that definition, right? So that's exactly what it is. And eventually we'll go to the nitty-gritties, but if you understand it this way, you can already start eliminating people. So, for example, your cousin comes to you. He's not a graduate. He said, I want to go. If you already know, federal skill worker is not going to be for him, because where is his work experience? Or is he a professional? Right? You can already eliminate. Somebody comes to you, I'm a doctor, I just graduated. Okay, let's ask. Somebody is a doctor and they just graduated this year. Can they go through federal skill workers? No. Why? Oh God, intelligent people, clap for yourself. Clap for yourself now. Thank you so much. Alright? So keep that in mind. That's the definition of what federal skill workers really means. Now let's go to Canadian experience class. Well, I'm not going to attempt to explain it the way I explained the first one. But this is where a sister asked about study abroad. This is where study abroad comes into play. So when you go to Canada to study, after that study, depending on the province, they may say, oh, if you have gotten a job that you have worked for 6 months or 1 year, depending on the province where you are. So once you study in Canada and you start working, which Like when you say you start working, then some people are scared. Like, so how would I get the job? Like, how many people graduate in Canada and they're like, I am jobless? That's not the norm, right? So you study in Canada, you finish, you start working, then you qualify for that class. So what this means is that people who go through study abroad eventually qualify for Canadian experience class. So Canadian experience means that they have experience working in Canada, or they have let me not say they have Canadian experience. So the fact that they studied in Canada means like they don't really know what the country is like and all that. So let me explain why that information is important. That person has Canadian experience. For example, if you have studied in Canada for 2 years, they know that you know how to speak English. Well, for you to study and graduate in an English-speaking country, you know how to speak English. So when it comes to express entry, let's say the English test score that is required for the first one is not the same with the English test score that is required for the second one. That one is like is like make you just do the English test. Let's just be double sure. But they're not going to say get like band 9, 888. No. For Canadian experience class, for example, IELTS, they will say 666. So why? Because you have Canadian experience. Somebody already knows that you studied in Canada. Don't worry, we know you know English. But just write the exam. Provided you just pass, anyhow, you will still take you.
Sorry, Mom.
Right? So that Canadian experience could also cover that's why they say the person should have started working. So it's like you have gone to school here, you know, you have even gotten a job somewhere. Who else is better qualified to live in the country than you? So the scrutiny they are giving to you is different from the scrutiny they are giving to somebody that is outside of Canada who they don't know whether the person speaks English. Then they say you must have a particular grade. Or they don't know the kind of work or the kind of study the person has done. They will just be skeptical, right? That's why they will not say, please be a graduate. Because they are not sure if your high school can carry you through for you to survive. So, the Canadian experience class simply means the person qualifies because they have Canadian experience. And usually, that's where the study abroad falls under. And the good part is that if you go through study abroad, especially if you are going as a graduate, you will qualify for Canadian experience class, and you are still likely to qualify for federal skilled workers. So you qualify for 2 rounds, which means that you can be in the pool for federal skilled workers, and they will call people that study you go. So it's like making assurance double sure for things that one is already enough. That means it's like you must immigrate. You see, so that is it for Canadian experience class. Then the provincial nominee program. So this is the third version of express entry. Let me put it that way. Is the provincial nominee program. What does this mean, or what does it entail? It means a state. I'm using state because we're holding this training in Nigeria. So I'm saying something that is like you can always compare. Right? I say, states, okay. So provinces are called, states are called provinces, let me put it that way. And Canada has about 13 provinces. So provincial nominee means a province wants you. So they will give you like a certificate. Like, hey, we want you. God show this to the government that we want you. Let me put it that way. So how it works is that when a province, okay, let me put it this way. If a province wants a particular set of people, they will call those people. Like, they will say, you can apply. We're looking for doctors. So, now you're a doctor and you go and apply to that state. The state say, we pick you. Take this certificate. Go and show it to the government. Let me explain what that means. Because when you do provincial nominee, when you get the provincial nominee certificate, you will still go back to the to number 1. Like the process you pass through is still the number 1 process, that federal skill worker. But because of the certificate the state has given to you, like you must pass. So I don't know if I'm the only person wondering, why will a state want to ask you to come? Let me give you an example. How many people came from Kaduna, like you reside in Kaduna, very, like, that's where you reside? Nobody? Okay. How many people have done their youth corps service here? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people would like to be posted to Kaduna? Why? Yes. Meaning, for some unfavorable conditions, you don't want to go to a particular state. So, the state can now say, we'll give you a certificate, you come and stay with us. Actually, that's what happens. Like, so they'll give you a certificate that when you come to Canada, you must come to our place. But people don't want to stay there. So, when you agree, they say come. So, it's like a transaction. While insecurity may be a reason why somebody may not want to go to Kaduna in Nigeria, in Canada, code, I told you, code is the winch in the room. so, especially the Atlantic region, they are so cold. Like, you see some pictures, you be like, is this somebody's house? When, like, snow will fall, cover your door. It's like you use shovel and removing the snow from your door, right? So, of course, I'm also giving extreme examples. But those are also realities, right? Or let's say you come out to go to work. Like, snow has covered your car. Like, you can't drive. Like, the work you will do, say, you will be shoveling snow from your car. It's so much, right? And sometimes when you have removed the snow, then you see that there's ice on there. Then you start hitting the cars for it to melt. Before you now go, so sometimes you have to come out 30 minutes before. And as you're doing this, your hands are freezing. Yeah. So nobody really wants to go to those kind of places. So they will do transactions with you. Right? And that's like, I'm using Atlantic region for example, because different areas, thank you. Sorry, somebody say Toyota Corolla SMK 331 GU, your attention is needed. Thank you. So, different provinces have what they are looking for, or what the reason people may not want to come to their place. And sometimes it's not just about the fact that people don't want to come to their place. Let me give you another example. So, one example I use to drive home this information. Now, let's say you have a lot of money. You have a lot of money. And I just want to use house girl for example. There are 10 house girls and they say, we will randomly shovel them around. But there's a particular one you really, really, really like. And you have a lot of money. One of the things you can do is, see, people are collecting 100,000. I'll give you 150,000, but come and work for me. Right? Like, it's like you are buying them over. So let me bring this down to a province like Ontario. Ontario is very open. A lot of people go to Ontario. But Ontario may need more tech people. Because it's like they will just want to sell. I told you there's tech shortage, right? Tech people shortage. So they will just need to get more tech people coming to Ontario so that they will say Ontario is booming with a lot of tech innovation. So because of that, they may say, if you're a tech person, come and collect a certificate from us. And you promise that when you come to Canada, you're going to come to my province. You see? So it's not always like a bad thing. Like, places are not getting... are not asking you to come to, like provinces are not asking you to come to their place always for bad reasons, right? Like because it's too cold or something. It could be that like a place like Saskatchewan, they need doctors, right? So they will say, Ontario has a lot of doctors. So and most people they would like to go to Ontario because Ontario is very, very open, like it's the most open place. Now if you are coming and you say, we need doctors, so and you now you're a doctor. You want to go, Saskatchewan can say, take certificate, promise that when you come to Canada, you come to our place, right? So that's what provincial nominee is about. So now, the main thing is for you to see which of these provinces are looking for people like you, so that you can go and make that trade with them. Like, I promise to come to your place, you give me certificate so that I can come. And when they give you that certificate, you go back to number one to apply through Federal Skill Worker. But let me give you an example. Provincial nominee certificate is about 600 points. So once you just get it, it's like you are being called like the next 2 weeks or something less anytime you are doing the draw, because your score will be so high that you must join the next people that are being called. So that's provincial nominee for you. Meaning the province is nominating you to be one of those persons that should be called. Right? Then we'll have the federal skills trade. So this is, the one we said federal skill workers, we were explaining them based on is a country-wide program for people that are skilled and they are workers. So in this particular number 4, federal skill trade, these are people that are skilled, not necessarily based on their educational qualification, but based on trade. So like a plumber, a farmer, a butcher, those kind of things, those kind of people are going to fall under that category. And it goes the same, it's like the requirements are different. So even if you're not a graduate, for example, I gave an example when I said if a cousin came to you and said, I want to travel, but you see that they are not the type that have gone to school. You know that they're not going to qualify for federal skill workers, right? But if they have a specific trade and maybe they've started, let's say you see somebody is a baker and they've gone to baking school and they've finished that baking school 1 year, they have a certificate, there is an opportunity for them to still immigrate. But let's say you now see somebody does not have any, you say, yeah, I run around, I do some, buying and selling kind of, and they have not gone to school, and the person now saying, I want to immigrate. It may just become difficult. Sorry. Are the two ACs on? Two of them. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So so those are the 4 major routes under express entry. And now that I've explained it, I'm going to be focusing on federal skill workers from now onwards until we start talking about alternatives, right? Why? Because federal skill workers is the one that has to do a lot with graduates. The Canadian experience class is somebody that is already in Canada, right? So it's like, that's not what applies to most of the audience that we have today. And provision of new one, we're still going to talk about it later. And then we'll have federal skill workers. So I'm going to go on to focus on federal skill workers, countrywide program for people that are skilled and they have work experience, right? So the question is, what are the key factors that influence your eligibility for you to be eligible? So there are many factors, but we're talking about the key ones, the ones that like, without it, there's a lot of problem. And I'm actually even missing one in that. There's supposed to be 5. Age is one of them. So let's start with age. the missing unknown or the missing known. So age is a very, very big factor. Why? Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think? Does anybody know? Sure.
Well, because the younger you are, the more productive you're likely to be when you come into Canada. If you are very old already, and Canada also has a very old population, you're coming around to be relevant.
Mm-hmm. That's very correct, actually. That's very correct because the Canada population, the population has a lot of older adults, right? Like people that are aged 50, 60, 70, 80. That's what makes up they are, in terms of proportion, they have a lot of older people. So they are looking for how to add to the workforce. Let me put it this way. That's the whole reason, or the major reason for all this express entry or other forms of immigration that they are doing. the population is aging. So, and let's say in a place like Nigeria, you see a woman will give birth to 3 at least, 4, 5 is normal. Canada, 1 is already, you are doing well. 2 is like, really? You have money to take care of 2 children? And some people will be like, they don't even want to give birth at all in Canada. Like, they think, yeah, it's a very pronounced choice. Like, you see people that are like, I'm not getting married, I'm not giving birth, or we are married, we adopt a dog. It's a culture. So you see that the population is aging and is not being replaced. Right? Because somebody will say, so why is it that Canada is even doing all this? Is it just because they are good? Well, yeah, they are good, but they also have a need that they are trying to fill. So the point is, the population is aging. What's the essence of taking somebody who probably just have 10 more years, when in place of that person, they can take somebody else who has 40 years more to give to the workforce, right? So it's not that if you are older, you can no longer invest in Canada, no. But the younger you are, the better. You see, that's how age works. So it's not as if it's an eliminating factor, but the younger you are, the better. For example, when it comes to that federal skilled workers, once you're above 30 years, you start losing points. It does not mean that once you're above 30 years, you cannot immigrate, but you start losing points. And every birthday that they cut cake for you, your chances also drops, right? So we're also going to talk more about that age thing, because this is why somebody cannot say, don't worry, I'm trying to do some things now. Let me just finish this one before I start. That time that you're wasting can just be the reason why you no longer qualify by the time you're ready. So if it's something you want to do, it's better to do it quick. However, it's not like that for everybody. Imagine you are 22. As I said, when you get to 30, you start losing points after each year that you add. So imagine you are 22. That means you still have 8 years to get to 30. So it's not really going to age is not going to be a problem for you, right? If you want to immigrate today, if you want to do it in 2 years' time, well, there's still an issue because policies can change. So that means last, anything you want to do, just do it now. No need to wait. Okay. So that's one key factor. Then the next key factor is the tests, and I think there are 3 of them in total. So IELTS, that one is very popular, English test. Then there's the TEF, right? And I have somebody in the room that will talk about it. And we put some, anyway, I will tell you more. Then there's this one they call CELPIP. CELPIP is a Canadian exam. So most times you only get to do CELPIP if you're already in Canada, because they don't really offer the tests outside. So if you're outside of Canada and you're trying to immigrate, somebody may be wondering, if you're inside of Canada, why are you still trying to immigrate? Let's say you went as a student and you want to do Canadian Experience class or federal skilled worker. You see, now you're already inside the country and you want to do so, you can take CELPIP as well. But majorly for people outside the country, is IELTS and the French exam, TEF as it's called. Alright, so the score of those tests really matters a lot. So let me talk about the popular one, IELTS, right? So IELTS, there's something they call Band 9. Who knows what Band 9 stands for? Or the score IELTS score that is referred to as Band 9.
Native user.
Sorry, raise your hand. Who else? Okay, go.
Native user.
Yeah, but what point? What grade?
I think they will test your listening. They will test your listening ability. They will test your test of English speaking.
Please raise your hand if you want to answer. If somebody is answering, allow the person to answer. Oh, I not say any hand up.
They will test your listening. They will test your reading ability. They will test your speaking ability. I think by the time they grade all of them, you should be able to meet that 9 band.
Yeah, you tried. You tried. So let's see if there's any other person in the room that yes is. Oh my God, I'm shocked. I don't know, like that's something that everyone was like, yes, my hand is up. Okay, there is sure.
Okay, so there are 4 competencies in IELTS. We have reading. Okay, so we have reading. Now, I think reading is about 40 questions, so you're expected to get either 39 or 40, right, in the reading. Then we have listening. Listening also has about 40 questions. I'm not so sure of the number of questions here, but you must score at least 1 point off the mark for the round figure. Then we have speaking. Speaking means that you were exceptional in your speaking, right? We do not have a number of questions. It's your examiner that gives you questions, and if you're able to answer your questions fluently, and then you'll be able to get your band 9 for speaking. And then the last one is writing. We're given two questions to write on, and one is a letter, and the other is I think an essay, yes. So if you're able to do exceptionally well with 2 parts, definitely you'll get your band 9.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, my question is, when you get to your IELTS, how many people have written IELTS in this room? Okay, so when you get your IELTS results, what do you see that will make you say, oh, I have band 9? Yeah, what score? Like, who knows? Okay, please, Mike.
To get a band 9, you have to have 8 across board, across reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Then you get a band 9.
Okay, you tried. You tried. Don't store that information in your brain yet. You have to modify it. Okay, sure, Emmanuel.
I think it's 7.0 then 8.0 for listening.
Tell me what do you have to have? Yeah, tell me.
I think 7.0 for reading, writing 7.0, then listening should be 8.0 to get the band 9.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So you yeah. Okay, good. Thank you so much. So for IELTS score, because when you get your IELTS result, what you actually see is points, right? Like 7, 6.5, 5.5. That's what you're going to see. But they also will put the band. So the points that make up the band is minimum of 8 in listening and 7 in the rest, which is writing, reading, and speaking. Yeah. So 8 in listening, 7 in the rest. That's what is called band 9. So let me twist it so that when it's twisted you understand. If you have 7 in listening, 8 in writing, 7. Do you have band 9? No. So it must be minimum of 8 in listening and minimum of 7 across board. So if you have 6.5 somewhere, it's not going to work. If you have 7.5 in listening but 9 in reading, 9 is still not band 9. And this is very important because some people will get their IELTS result and they'll be like, I tried though. Yes, you tried, that one is for sure. But like there is room for improvement. Why? Because whether you have band 9 or you have less than band 9. By the way, you can have more than you can have more grades apart from that minimum. Let's say you have 8 in listening and maybe 8 in reading, and so that's still band 9 and above. You get more score, but the differentiating factor is that band 9 or anything less. Why? Because when you put your score, when we get to the practical session, you're going to see it. When you put your points in the ranking, in the scale that is used for judging people, anything less than band 9 will give you about 40 points less. Like 40 points less than the score you're supposed to get. So it's like dramatic shift. So if you are the principal applicant, which we're going to talk about, if you are the principal applicant for Federal Skill Workers program, you have to have minimum of 9 for you to know that you have exhausted your IELTS writing option. If you have anything less than that, you have to rewrite. Like, there's no way you're going to make it, except there are some big magic you want to do. But so keep those figures in mind, right? So that when you see your IELTS result, without even talking to a professional, you are going to be your own self-agent. That I preach that all the time. You're going to be your own self-agent, so that when you see your IELTS score, you'll be able to say, it is enough, or no, I have to rewrite. You won't have to say, let me talk to an immigration lawyer to see if I need to rewrite or not. You see? And I'm going to ask that question later. So keep the figure in your head. Okay, so the other one, okay. So the other one is work years. So there is also a differentiating factor. So when it comes to work years, if you have up to, provided you have up to 1 year work experience, you are qualified. 1 year work experience is the minimum, right? But also, if you have 1 year and 2 years, you practically have the same points or the same score. Like, let's say if somebody has 1 year, another person has 2 years, you're not better in any way. But the differentiating figure is 3 years. So if you have 3 years and above, there's a dramatic shift. It's about 25 points or 50 points, one of the two. There's also a dramatic shift. So if you have 7 years, you will still have under work years, right? You are still as good as somebody who has 3 years. If you have 7 years, if you have 14 years, you're as good as somebody who has 3 years. This is important. Why? Some people have told me, I have 10 years. In their mind, they're saying that I have 10 years work experience. We told that it's 10 years is a lot. But it does not, whether you have 10 years or you have 3 years, there's no difference. Whether you have 10 years or 5 years, there's no difference. So it's either you have 3 years and above or you have less than 3 years. If you have less than 1 year, you are not qualified for Federal Skill Workers. So if you have 1 year, 2 years, 2.5 years, it's the same thing. If you have 3 years, 10 years, 14 years, it's the same thing. You see? So 3 years is the differentiating figure there. Keep those points. Keep that point. Alright? Keep that point because I'm going to ask about it later. So that's it about work here. So when you understand what really matters, it becomes easier for you to do your own assessment or to do assessment for a relative or friend who is interested. Now, marriage is another thing. So if you are single, let me ask, a single person or a married person, who do you think will get more points? Raise your hand. When it's in chorus, nobody knows who is talking. Then, sure. What do you say? Married person will have more points. Anybody from here? Single? Okay. Anybody from here? Sure. Oh,
Married, single.
Married? Anybody from the back? Oh, I can see you. You say single. Single. Okay, we'll have 4 people. So actually, even though it looks like if you're married, you have more points. If you are single, you have more points. More points for single people. Do you know why? When you are coming with a man, let's say you're married, they are not judging only. Like, yes, you are the one that is coming. You are the one doing all the exams. But you get somebody. So if they admit you just based on you, whatever the person you are bringing, you're not coming alone. You are coming. There are 2 people, and I'm going to explain what I mean by having more points. And it's relative, right? But generally, if you are single, you have more points. So, like, if you are married and I am single, and we do the assessments, even though we have the same exact characteristics, just minus the marriage. Let's say both of us are doctors, both of us have 3 years work experience, got band 9, and all that. Provided we have all those things, but it's just marriage that is the separating factor, your score will be like 40 points less or 40 points less than mine because you are married. Okay? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, don't worry about that. So, people are going to, your score will be less than mine. Now, there is a catch. How do you get those scores back? Because even that if you're married, that the word has ended. No. It means that the same exam that you wrote, the same results that you verified, and all those things, your spouse has to do the same. And where it now becomes an issue is if your spouse is less qualified than you are, it becomes a problem because it's like, yeah, you're a doctor, but maybe your spouse has BSc, or your spouse is not even a graduate. Your score is going to drop because Canada is saying, yes, you're a doctor, you're coming, but you're also coming with somebody who would not go to school, right? So it's like, we give you lesser points. We're less likely to select you compared to somebody who is coming, the person is a doctor, and they are just ready to work. They are not coming with any other extra person. Also, let me put it this way. Unfortunately, even though, like when the person have a lesser grade, they weigh down your score the more. If they have a higher grade, let's say the person has a PhD. Let's say the person has a PhD. It's not necessarily going to increase your score more than the single person's own. Like it may just make you have the same score that the person that is single will have. Do you get? So just understand that when it comes to marriage, if you are married, okay, let me put it this way. The take you away from that is that if you are married, you have to ensure that your spouse take the exams, do the verification, because if not, your point is going to be affected based on the fact that you are married. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Although like this thing caused like a problem, like from the man started to quarrel with his wife and she's not very bright. The man started to quarrel with his wife that she's not very bright, that she's the one that's making them fail. But my question is, the man finally decided not to go with the wife and the children because of the wife had made them fail a lot of times. So what if the person now says like mentally I'm not married? Like yes, I'm married but I'm not coming with them. Does this still affect my point?
Guess what? It's in the next slide. So I'm going to hold on to that question. Like everybody hold it like this. We're going to treat it because I actually put it because some people may make that decision. It's not necessarily the best decision to make, and I'm going to explain it there. Okay? Thank you. Important question. Like I knew you would ask.
So, what do you mind as a spouse? My husband has taken his phone and he got his phone store, and when me I'm taking my mind is bigger and it's higher than me. Oh, now.
Do you know what is interesting? Because I have covered this under a particular like a section called top 3 mistakes. You know, I mentioned this. Yeah. So we're going to talk about them. Like I promise you. Okay. So let me just explain those key factors, right? And then we can go more into that. So when the next thing is educational level of that person. So what you're going to notice is that for federal skill workers, at least you need to be a graduate. But that's not the end of it. The official thing is that you need to be a graduate to qualify. But because there's a ranking system, it's like think of it this way. There is a ranking system that grades people. But this ranking system only grades people that have BSc or more, right? Who are going to be the least in the pool? The BSc holders, the master's holders, or the PhD holders? Yes. So most times, because what Canada usually do is like, Canada will throw into a pool like this. Like, you see these bubbles, that is how people feel like in a pool, right? And now, they are going to come and select the top ones. Every time they come, they will say, give me 10. I'm giving an example. Give me 10. They will say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because they are 5, 6, 7. So you know that you are here. The base, right? The BSc holders. You almost never get to make it. Wow. I don't know how many people remember that story of someone that was very close to a river that could make them see, and they were blind. But they were there, nobody to throw them inside. And so for several years, they were there and they were still blind. That's what happened to BSc. Maximum BSc hold, like your maximum level of education is BSc, and you are entering federal skill worker pool, right? That's what the person can stay there for 10 years. It's not 31 years. So like, the person can stay there for a very long time, and they will still never get called because you are the base. Every time Canada will come and say, "Give me 20 people," they will collect this tip like this. And who are the tip? PhD holders, master's holders, medicine, pharmacy, optometry, veterinary medicine, dentistry, thank you. Dentistry, called optometry. There are about 7 programs that have, let me call it this, they have immunity. They have immunity. So if medicine, law, medicine, law, no, nursing is not part of it. Medicine, law, pharmacy, dentistry, chiropractic, pharmacy, veterinary medicine. Engineering is not part of it. Accounting, not part of it. Nursing, not part of it. So, no educational. I said programs that have immunity. I did not say these are the people that can go to Canada. So what do I mean by they have immunity? If you study any of these programs, they treat you like somebody who has a master's. So is somebody who has a master's or somebody who studied a program that has immunity. Let's give it that. Now we formed that one. So if you studied if you have masters already, or you studied any of these programs, and I would think that it's because they just want to attract those professionals. And again, most times they spend a higher number of years in such a way that if you're doing BSc and masters, you will finish safe, and sometimes those people are still in school, right? So they equate them to master's level. So even though officially, get this small point, officially if you have BSc, you are qualified. But if BSc is your maximum level of education, you are the base, you almost never get called. Now, I'm going to get to the question in a moment. So now, the problem is that, when you do, I think I have a place I'm going to be talking about agency assessment. When you go to somebody that even say, pay money, let me do assessment for you. You pay them, they do assessment. You're a BSc holder, what would they tell you? Qualified. But if you don't know, you will not know that you've entered a journey that will never end, or that will end in another lifetime. Even though you are officially qualified, like when they say, since how do you say that? I'm getting old. I've never seen a BSc maximum holder who has immigrated through that federal skill workaround. You enter the pool. You are qualified to enter the pool like this bubble, but you always here behind. So beware of assessment that will say you are qualified. Enter pool. Or you immigrate. So that's how it works. So keep that in mind because it's an essential information. So when it comes to education level, somebody that we start and complete the process is somebody who has a master's or any of those programs with immunity, right? And I'm going to ask later 7 programs. So keep that in mind and collect your dollars and go. Collect your dollars, go. So these are some of the things to note, okay, about education level. That yes, BSc you're qualified, but you will not put through. So if you're a BSc holder and you're in the pool and you're having like BSc holder and you've not studied any of those immunity courses, and you are just happy, yes, I've entered the pool now. My dear, please just look for alternative or get another degree or like an additional degree or do something. We're going to talk about the things you can do, but do something. Don't just be happy and stay there because that journey is not going to be ending soon if you don't do something else.
How about nursing?
How about nursing is not part of the programs with immunity. So if somebody has like a master's in nursing, they can successfully go through that route. So it's not that, like somebody was asking before, like engineering, it's not that if you have engineering you can't go. But if you have engineering, then you have to get master's first. If you want to just go direct, right? Okay, so now I'm entering the Like, what are some of the things you've heard about express entry? Then we can discuss whether those things are true or if they are misguided. Sure, go ahead.